What happens if social creatures, wolves or humans, aren't allowed to play? These are the Timber Twins, two pure timber wolves that were brought here when they were 3 months old.
They were terribly malnourished, very, very ill. They had been neglected. They couldn't even really run and move because their hind legs had been limited for so long. So they had been deprived of an atmosphere where they could play. They didn't have enough space. They didn't feel safe. They were not healthy enough to play.
CJ and her assistant, Renee Seelbach, documented the Timber Twins' progress in photos and home movies. Shortly after they arrived, they were put in an enclosure with 2 other young wolves, British Columbian purebreds.
What do you think? The play behavior when they first got here was non-existent. But when we got the 4 of them together, the urge to play was much stronger than their fear because there were 4 youngsters together and they just had to play together. And that was how they got to know each other.
That's also how they began to regain their physical and mental health.
Play is very important. Play, of course, is the first thing that the youngsters do. And they play when they're very young. And that involves a lot of muzzle wrestling. They put each other's faces in their mouth.
As the Timber Twins played, they became less fearful and depressed. We tend to think that the opposite of play is work, but in truth, the opposite of play is depression.
Play deprivation can have irreversible consequences if it persists long enough to actually create neurological or physiological damage. Once that damage has been caused, it's there. The Timber Twins were play deprived. Once they were in an environment where they could play, they got it back very quickly. They're real pranksters now.
The Timber Twins are now 9 months old. They play fight and chase each other like any healthy teenagers, wolf or human.
Okay.
Fred Donaldson is a frequent visitor at Raised by Wolves. Like CJ, he has a lifelong interest in play.
Hi, bud.
Once a university professor, Fred left academia to work with preschool children. After spending lots of time with kids and watching the play of animals, Fred began noticing similarities.
So I began to think that what the kids were teaching me wasn't just a behavior pattern of young children. This was perhaps a pattern of belonging and a pattern of behavior that cut across all life.
Fred calls this universal behavior original play, the play that all social species are born with. But as we develop, Fred thinks we can lose touch with our original sense of play. If that happens, what are the consequences?
Sometimes there'll be some wonderful play behavior going on, some play fighting going on, and it'll just cross over the line and suddenly it's real fighting. It's not play fighting anymore. And I don't know what that line is. That's one of the things I'm trying to figure out here.
What happens when real anger breaks through and destroys the play? Can play help restore the balance and heal the wounds? These are some of the questions Fred Donaldson explores in his work with special needs kids in the rural Moreno Valley of Southern California. Fred does lots of physical play. He thinks it's where original play begins.
I think to be deprived of play is to be deprived of an essential sense of belonging to all life, a real sense that I belong, that I'm safe. That's the first and most important thing.
And that closeness of the body, that is building confidence in them about you and them as bodies. It's a security. You're giving them the most basic form of security by doing that kind of play.
They love playing with Fred. It allows them to open up. Sometimes what they can't say, they can express while they're playing.
Jan Donaldson is the program specialist for the Moreno Valley Special Education classes.
I think in traditional play therapy, there's a goal to analyze and seek understanding for what's going on inside the child. But with Fred, there are no conditions, there's no expectation. We used to have a saying, it was expect nothing and be ready for anything. And that's actually what happens in play. You have to let all of that go. And that's a big difference, is really going on the ground, absolutely unconditionally giving and receiving of love.
A society that's play deprived raises human beings who are isolates, rogues who wander around and without that connection tend to crash into each other. And our crashing into each other can be physical violence of the shooting type, or it can be emotional violence. So essentially play connects us. When we don't have it, we become isolates.
As a play specialist in the public school system, Fred sees all kinds of kids, including severely challenged middle schoolers with multiple problems.
The more severely involved a child is, the more their play skills are disenfranchised, and it's more difficult for people on the outside to learn how to play with kids. And especially the real severely involved kids, you know, we're almost taught to not stare and avoid contact. And you know, certainly you could see with Kiwi. Kiwi oftentimes is in a wheelchair, and the only human contact he has is people moving him from one position to the other, and that's it. So when Fred gets him on to the ground, it's like play is like a key to Kiwi that unlocks his body, and Kiwi just gets right into it. You could see him moving, and the laughter and the expressions of movement, and Kiwi normally is very nonverbal. I think it's very, very bold for our school district to take in and incorporate and contract out with Fred, because people are so happy and so paranoid. And it's the power of touch is so incredibly powerful. And I think for our kids too, that kind of touch and that kind of trust and that kind of give and take of love is just vital for their growth and development.
Katie did it. Yeah. Oh. Are you laughing? Are you laughing? Because you pushed me? Huh? Yeah. Yeah. You think that's funny?
My sense is that if you take all of the therapies and the religions and all the things, the processes that we have created as adults, what they're trying to do is bring us back to the state that we had in childhood play.
Who were your very first playmates? Logically, the answer should be your parents. But in practice, that's not always the case. Marina Barone had very little parental play when she was growing up, which may be why she and her husband are determined to raise their children differently.
I wake my son up in a happy mood. Something about waking your kid up in a rude manner, you know, like, hurry up, it's time to get up for school. I mean, wow, even the sound of that even bothers me. Come on, Mama, you gotta help me wake him up. 10 minutes, 5 minutes even, about playtime with your kids in the morning. You send them off to school in a good mood.
For the Barones, play starts with an attitude. Anything can be play, even breakfast. They've decided that being a family should be fun. For Marina, her husband Greg, and their children Ryan and Renee, play is the fuel the family runs on.
I don't know how you figure out play. I think if something makes you happy, you repeat it. If you like doing something, you're always going to do it. And when my son was born, to hear him laugh made me happy. And it just continued on from there. I think that's just natural. Playing and having fun, I think you really need that. If you don't have that, you become a sour person. And nobody wants to be around sour people, I don't think.
If you are humorous as parents and you allow the children to be humorous, they get to be people who think differently. That different thinking can be turned into all kinds of inventions and all kinds of businesses and so on. This is the source of the new society and its need for a lot of potentially different minds.
Play is something you do to take stuff off your mind and just have fun. My mom is very playful because she'll do almost anything I ask her to except for playing video games because she knows that she's not good at it, so she won't play it. Okay. She plays with both of us a lot. Sometimes she'll need to catch up on her homework, but she'll still play with us.
Marina's homework is for her college classes. She's majoring in criminal justice. Her studies go hand in hand with her job. Marina is a cop, and her precinct includes one of San Francisco's toughest neighborhoods, the notorious Tenderloin. But even here, Marina's sense of family is anything but irrelevant.
I think people fear the Tenderloin, and you fear the unknown. And if you don't know what the Tenderloin's about. But once you get to know everybody and everybody gets to know you, everybody's human and everybody has a story. Yes, I have been afraid. I'm not going to tell you I haven't been afraid. Comforting thing in working in a Tenderloin is if you call for backup before you can say up, they're there.
What's the problem today?
Marina herself grew up in a bleak environment. She knows the physical and emotional costs of poverty, how it can rob people of joy.
My mom was born in El Salvador to a poor situation. She didn't have much. She had 2 dresses, one to wash, one to wear. There was no playtime.
40 years ago, Juanita Chacon Noguera came to the United States dreaming of a better life. Today, surrounded by her family, Juanita is becoming a United States citizen. But getting to this point was quite a struggle.
Do you and each and every one of you declare on oath that
She had to figure out how she's going to take care of 2 kids by herself, pay rent, and those were her priorities, survival. It was about keeping us clean, clothed, disciplined, and that was it. So there was not a lot of playtime at our house. Mom thought play was a waste of time. When we asked her if we can go outside, the first thing she would say is, "Do you have nothing better to do?"
Fellow Americans, citizens of the United States, congratulations.
Yeah, I think my mom's body was invaded by a UFO when my kid was born because she is not the same lady that raised us. Of course, she doesn't have those same stress levels. You know, life is, everyone goes through different changes, and I tell you, she's a different person as a grandma. She spoils those kids rotten.